Nobody noticed she was disappearing because she never stopped showing up. That is the thing nobody talks about. The way a woman can be present every single day, in every room, at every table, for every person who needs her, and still be slowly, quietly vanishing. The way she can cook the meals and fold the clothes and answer the calls and hold the crying children and sit beside the sick parent and still be going somewhere nobody can see. Still be fading. Still be leaving. Not through a door, not with a suitcase, not with any announcement at all. Just piece by piece, layer by layer, until one day she looks in the mirror and doesn't quite recognize the woman standing there. This is her story. Maybe it's your story. She didn't start out this way. There was a time, and she remembers it if she goes back far enough, if she's quiet enough to hear it, when she had something soft inside her, something easy and open, before she learned to make herself smaller, before she learned that being a woman meant being useful, before anyone taught her that love was something you earned through sacrifice and not something you were simply given because you existed and you mattered. She remembers being young. She remembers wanting things for herself. Big, unashamed things. She remembers the version of herself who had opinions about her own life, who had dreams that had nothing to do with anyone else's comfort, who wanted to be seen not for what she could do, but for who she actually was. She remembers that girl. But she also remembers when that girl started to disappear. It didn't happen all at once. That's not how it works for women like her. It happened the way a river changes a landscape, slowly, steadily, so gradually that one day you look at the ground you're standing on and realize it is nothing like it was before, and you cannot point to the single moment it changed. You just know that it did. She grew up watching the women around her give everything. Her mother, her grandmothers, the women at church with their wide, tired smiles, the aunties who cooked all day and never sat down to eat until everyone else had finished, the women who worked all week and then came home and worked all weekend and never, not once, complained loud enough for anyone to hear. She watched them and she absorbed it the way children absorb everything, quietly, completely, without understanding what she was taking in. She absorbed the lesson that a good woman gives. A good woman serves. A good woman puts herself last and calls it love. So when she fell in love and got married and started her life, she already knew how to play the role. She had been rehearsing it her whole childhood without knowing that's what she was doing. She was going to be a good woman. She was going to be a good wife. She was going to be the kind of woman people looked at and said, she holds everything together. She holds her family together. She's the strong one. She wanted that. She genuinely wanted it. That is the part that breaks you a little when you really sit with it. She wasn't tricked into it. She chose it. She walked toward it with her whole heart open because nobody had ever shown her what the cost would be. Nobody sat her down and said, "Baby, the world will take everything you offer and it will call you blessed and it will never once ask if you're okay." Nobody warned her. Not because they were cruel, but because the women who could have warned her had already disappeared the same way. And they didn't even know it. In the beginning, it felt like love. The early years. She can still see them if she closes her eyes. The small apartment. The big plans. The way she felt standing beside him, believing they were building something real. She was happy in those days, or close to it. Full of something. A sense of purpose she could hold in her hands. She was needed. She was valued. She was good at this. She cooked meals she was proud of. She decorated the space. She ironed clothes on Sunday evenings. She remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every important day for every person in her life. She was the keeper of details, the carrier of the calendar. She knew what the children needed before they asked. She knew when her husband was stressed before he said a word. She knew when her mother needed a call, when her sister needed a shoulder, when a friend needed someone to show up. She knew everyone's needs. She was very good at that. She just didn't notice, not for a long time, that no one was learning hers. It started small. Most damage starts small. The first time he forgot something important to her, she told herself he was busy. The first time she cooked a meal and nobody said thank you, she told herself they were tired. The first time she cried in the bathroom and came out and smiled at the table and nobody noticed the difference, she told herself she was being dramatic. She had a gift for explaining away her own pain. She had been taught that gift early. She started shrinking her needs down to a size that felt less inconvenient. She stopped mentioning things that bothered her because the conversation always seemed to become about something else. She stopped asking for things she wanted because wanting felt ungrateful. She had so much, after all: a home, a family, people who needed her. She had been told, in ways spoken and unspoken, that this was the point. This was the goal. She had arrived. So why did she feel so alone? That question sat in her chest for years before she allowed herself to examine it. Because examining it meant admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. That the life she had built to feel loved was not quite making her feel loved. That being needed is not the same thing as being cherished. That being useful is not the same thing as being known. She was appreciated. She wants to be fair about that. They appreciated her. They depended on her. They would have been lost without her. And somewhere deep inside, she knew it, and sometimes it was enough. Sometimes it almost felt like love. But appreciation is not the same as love. And she was just beginning, in those early years to feel the difference. She just didn't have the words for it yet. She didn't know how to say, "I am here every day, and I feel invisible. I cook and I clean, and I show up, and I sacrifice, and I give, and I give, and I give, and sometimes I go to bed at night feeling like a function and not a person, like a service and not a soul." She didn't know how to say any of that without feeling like she was being ungrateful, without feeling like she was being difficult, without feeling like she was asking for too much. So she didn't say it. She just kept going. She kept cooking. She kept showing up. She kept being everything to everyone. And nobody noticed she was disappearing because she never stopped showing up. There is a particular kind of silence that happens after everyone goes to sleep. She knows it well. The house settles. The noise fades. The needs of the day, the constant, relentless, never-finished needs, they quiet down for a few hours. And she should sleep. She knows she should sleep because tomorrow starts early, and tomorrow will be exactly like today, and the day before that, and the day before that. She knows she should rest. But sometimes she just sits in the kitchen, in the dark, with a cup of tea that goes cold, or on the couch with the television on low, not really watching, just needing the noise so the silence doesn't become too loud. Or at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand, scrolling through other people's lives, looking at something she cannot quite name. She sits there in that quiet, and she tries to remember the last time she felt. Not happy exactly, but full. Not performing, not managing, not holding something together. Just full. Just herself. She has to go back further each time she tries to find it. That is the slow disappearing. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a dramatic moment you can point to later and say, that was when everything changed. It comes in the accumulation of small things. The repetition of being unseen. The daily, ordinary erosion of a woman who gives too much to people who take without noticing. Think about a single day. She wakes up before anyone else. She has to, because if she doesn't wake up first, nothing gets done. The lunches don't get made. The school forms don't get signed. The permission slip that's been sitting on the counter for 3 days doesn't get handled. She is the one who remembers these things. She is the keeper of everything that would fall apart if she stopped keeping it. She moves through the morning like a current. Quiet, constant, essential. She makes breakfast and nobody says thank you. Not because they're ungrateful people. She tells herself this. Just because they're busy. They're rushing. They have places to be. And she tells herself this is fine. This is normal. This is just how mornings work in a family. She doesn't need the thank you. She's not doing it for the thank you. But somewhere very small and very quiet inside her, she notices. She always notices. She gets everyone out the door, and then she gets herself ready, and she goes to work because she works. She has always worked. The image of a black woman sitting home doing nothing is not her reality and never has been. And she carries the weight of the house with her to the office. She makes mental notes about what needs to happen tonight, what she forgot this morning, what she needs to pick up on the way home. She is solving other people's problems all day at work, and then she comes home and she solves them again. She picks up dinner or she cooks it. She cleans the kitchen. She checks on the homework. She answers the text from her mother. She responds to the group chat she doesn't have the energy for, but can't leave because then someone will be hurt. She remembers to call about the car appointment. She pays the bill she almost forgot. And somewhere in that evening, he is sitting on the couch, resting, decompressing. He had a long day too. She knows that. She's not being fair, she tells herself. He works hard. She knows he's tired. She doesn't want to be the kind of woman who nags, who counts, who keeps score. So she doesn't say anything. She finishes everything, and then she sits down. And by then it's late, and he might be asleep. Or he might say something ordinary, something surface level. And she answers it, and they sit in the same room together, and she feels further from him than she does from strangers on the street. She wonders when that happened. She wonders if he notices. She's almost certain he does not. When was the last time someone asked how she was, and waited for the real answer? Not the polite question. Not the passing, "How are you doing?" that expects, "I'm fine," and moves on. But the real question, the one where someone sits down across from her and looks at her, really looks at her, and says, "Talk to me. How are you actually doing? What do you need? What is happening inside you that you're not saying?" She tries to remember. She can't. There are the phone calls with her girlfriends. Yes. The occasional venting. The quick texts of solidarity. But even there, she finds herself managing. Listening more than speaking. Being the strong one, the stable one, the one with good advice. Even her friendships have become another place where she gives more than she receives. She doesn't blame her friends. They're tired too. Everyone is tired. But she notices. She is always noticing. She cries in the bathroom, sometimes. Quick, efficient tears. She has become efficient at her sadness the way she has become efficient at everything else. She goes in, she lets herself feel it for a few minutes, she washes her face, she goes back out. Nobody knows. Nobody asks. She reappears at the table with her eyes barely red and her expression composed, and the moment passes and life continues. She drives alone at night, sometimes. When she has to go somewhere, the grocery store, a quick errand, it doesn't matter, she takes the long way. She turns the music up. She drives through streets that don't need to be driven, and she breathes. Sometimes she cries there too. In the car, in the dark, at a red light, just for a moment. And then she pulls into the parking lot, and she gets herself together, and she goes inside, and she does what needs to be done. That car is the only place she is completely alone. She guards those drives. She stretches them out. She takes the longest route home. Because in the house there are needs, and in the car there is just her. At what point does loyalty become self-abandonment? She has never asked herself that question directly. She has felt the edge of it. She has circled around it in those late nights, and those car rides, and those bathroom moments. She has felt something trying to form into a question in the back of her mind, and she has pushed it down because the question felt dangerous. Because the question implied that maybe something was wrong. And if something was wrong, she would have to look at it. And she wasn't sure she had the strength to look at it and still keep going. So she kept going. She kept texting people who took too long to respond. She kept waiting for conversations that never happened. She kept hoping that one morning she would wake up and something would be different. That he would see her. That someone would see her. That the effort she poured into everything and everyone around her would one day be poured back. She waited. She gave more. She waited some more. She watched her birthdays come and go with the wrong kind of attention. People acknowledged the day, but nobody asked how she was feeling about the year that passed. Nobody asked what she wanted for the year ahead. Nobody sat with her long enough to really celebrate her. Not the function of her, not the mother and wife and daughter and worker and friend of her, but her. Just her. How do you explain loneliness inside a full house? She has tried. She has tried to explain it to herself in those quiet kitchen hours. The paradox of being surrounded by people who need you and feeling profoundly, achingly alone. Of being someone's everything and still feeling like nothing quite reaches you. Of being indispensable and invisible at the same time. She doesn't have the language for it. She has never been given the language for it. Because nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about the particular exhaustion of a woman who is needed by everyone and known by no one. Nobody talks about the grief of watching yourself disappear inside a life you chose, inside love you genuinely feel, inside responsibilities you would not abandon. Nobody talks about how you can love your family with everything you have and still feel, quietly, like you're dying inside the loving of them. She kept showing up, and they kept letting her. She learned it young, before she had the words for it, before she understood what was being installed inside her, deep in the architecture of who she was becoming. She learned it in the kitchen, watching the women cook. She learned it in the church, pew watching the women smile. She learned it in the hospital waiting rooms and the late-night phone calls and the way the women in her family moved through their pain like it was weather, something to be endured, not examined. She learned that a woman carries. That is what women do. They carry. They absorb. They take the weight that falls and they hold it and they keep moving. They do not put it down in front of people. They do not ask for someone else to hold it for a while. They carry it until they can carry it no more, and then they find a way to carry a little more still. She was taught this by women who were taught the same thing by women before them. Generations of carrying. And she took the lesson in, and she made it hers, and she wore it like identity because that is what it became. Not a behavior she had chosen, but a thing she simply was. She was a giver. She was a nurturer. She was strong. She was proud of that for a long time. She built her self-worth on it. I may not have everything, she told herself, but I am a good woman. I take care of the people I love. I don't quit. I don't walk away. I show up. No matter what, I show up. That is who I am. And it was who she was. She's not saying it wasn't real. She is not saying the love wasn't real. The love was real. The care was real. But somewhere underneath the love and the care, underneath the giving and the showing up, there was something else. Something she was not willing to look at for a very long time. Fear. She was giving out of fear. Fear that if she stopped, she would be left. Fear that if she asked for too much, she would be too much. Fear that if she let people see her emptiness, they would decide she wasn't worth staying for. She had been taught, not in words, but in the thousand small lessons of girlhood, that her value was conditional, that she was loved for what she produced, not for who she was. That being useful was the rent she paid for belonging. And so she paid it. Every day, without fail, she paid it. She gave more than was asked. She anticipated needs before they were expressed. She made herself indispensable because some part of her believed, genuinely, deeply believed, that the moment she stopped being needed, she would stop being loved. She confused need with love. That is the center of it. That is the wound underneath all the other wounds. Being needed felt like being loved. Having someone depend on her felt like being chosen. Being indispensable felt like matching. And so she became more and more essential, more and more necessary, giving more and more. And she told herself this was love. That this was what love looked like. That this is what the good women did, and they were loved for it. Nobody taught her how to rest without guilt. That sentence. She needs to sit with that sentence. She cannot remember a single time in her adult life when she rested, truly rested, deeply rested, without the voice in the back of her mind telling her she should be doing something, that the dishes were in the sink, that the laundry wasn't folded, that she should be checking on someone, that someone needed something, and here she was doing nothing, lying down, resting, as if she had the luxury of that, as if she had earned that, as if rest was something she was allowed to claim without apology. She couldn't rest without apologizing for it. She couldn't want things for herself without immediately wondering if she was being selfish. She couldn't take up space, emotional space, physical space, time, without calculating whether she had a right to it. She knew how to survive. She did not know how to be cared for. And here is the painful truth about that. She had become so efficient at not being cared for that she stopped signaling the need. She stopped reaching. She stopped asking. She had asked early on, early in the marriage, early in the friendships, early in the family dynamics, and the asks had not been answered the way she needed them to be answered. Not cruelly, not with malice, just not answered, not really. And after a while she learned. She learned not to ask for what she wasn't going to receive, because the not receiving hurt worse than the not asking. So she stopped asking. She performed instead. She performed contentment. She performed togetherness. She performed the happy wife, the capable mother, the woman who has it all together. She showed up to church looking like everything was fine. She showed up to the cookout laughing, eating, being good company. She showed up to the family gathering, carrying her dish, asking about other people's children, deflecting questions about herself with a smile and a subject change. She was a very good performer. Nobody in the audience knew they were watching a performance. And the worst part, the very worst part, is that she sometimes forgot too. She got so good at performing that she lost track of where the performance ended and where she began. She couldn't always tell, in an ordinary moment, whether she was genuinely okay or whether she was just doing the thing she had trained herself to do, which was to appear okay, which was to function, which was to not be a burden. She had been shrinking herself for so long, she couldn't find her original shape. People praised her strength while benefiting from the damage it caused her. That is the sentence she will sit with longest. Because the praise was real. They really did call her strong. They really did look at her like she was something admirable. The strong black woman. The backbone of the family. The one who holds everything together. The one who doesn't break. The one you can call at 2 a.m. and she will answer and she will figure it out and she will handle it. They praised her for the very thing that was destroying her. And she accepted the praise because it felt like the closest thing to being seen that she had access to. If she couldn't be seen in her softness, at least she was seen in her strength. If she couldn't be loved for her need, at least she was valued for her usefulness. She stayed too long, in situations that were taking more from her than they were giving. In relationships where the dynamic had calcified into something uneven and she kept hoping time would shift it. She stayed because she had invested so much, because she believed in loyalty, because she genuinely loved the people who were not loving her back in the way she needed, because leaving felt like failure, and she had been told her whole life that good women don't quit. So she didn't quit. She just quietly fell apart inside a life that looked intact from the outside. She kept shrinking. She gave up opinions to keep the peace. She gave up preferences to avoid conflict. She gave up time alone, time for herself, time to exist without being in service to someone, because the guilt of taking that time was worse than the exhaustion of not having it. She disappeared inside her own life. Not all at once. Slowly, the way the river changes the ground. It wasn't a dramatic moment. That is the first thing to understand. There was no lightning, no revelation, no single conversation that cracked everything open. She didn't wake up one morning with clarity, didn't have a fight that finally said the unsayable, didn't arrive at a moment that could be neatly described as the turning point. It was smaller than that. It was a window. She was standing at the kitchen window, the same window she had stood at hundreds of times, maybe thousands, looking out at the same backyard, the same fence, the same stretch of sky, and she was standing there waiting for the coffee to finish. An ordinary morning. Nothing unusual. Everyone was still asleep. The house was quiet, and she was looking out at the yard, and she really noticed the silence. Not just heard it, noticed it, felt it. She stood there for a moment longer than she meant to. And in that extra moment, something shifted. Something very small. Like a key turning in a lock she didn't know existed. She thought, when did I last feel like myself? Not okay. Not fine. Not managing. Herself. And the answer she heard back was a silence that went on too long. She stood there with her coffee, and she thought about it. She tried to trace it back. She tried to find the thread of herself, the original thread, the one that existed before she became so thoroughly necessary to everyone else. She pulled at it, and it frayed. She pulled further, and the thread went back further than she wanted to go. She put the thought away. She got on with the day. But the thought didn't go anywhere. That is the thing about the awakening. You can push it down, and she tried. She pushed it down more than once over the weeks and months that followed. But once you have heard the question, it cannot be unheard. Once you have felt the shape of the silence where the answer should be, you cannot make yourself stop feeling it. She started noticing things. She had always noticed. But before, when she noticed, she explained it away. Now she was noticing and not immediately reaching for the explanation. She was letting the noticing sit. She noticed that nobody asked how she was doing with anything real. She noticed that when she was sick, the one time she was sick, the winter she had the flu and could barely get out of bed, the household did not absorb it gracefully. It became a crisis. The functioning stopped. The meals stopped. The errands piled up. And she lay in bed, not being allowed to simply be sick, being needed even in her sickness, and something about that felt wrong in a way she couldn't name right away. She noticed that she had not had an uninterrupted hour to herself in longer than she could remember. She noticed that her opinions had stopped being asked for, that conversations in her own home moved past her, around her, without pausing to include her, that she had become gradually background, essential background, the kind of thing you only notice when it's gone. She noticed that she existed most vividly when she was useful. And the question formed: if she stopped giving, if she stopped being available, stopped anticipating, stopped filling every space, would anybody still come looking for her? Not for what she could do. For her. She let herself hold that question. She didn't push it away. She sat with it in the kitchen in the dark, and she let it be as heavy as it actually was. And it was heavy. It was the heaviest question she had ever asked herself, because it pointed toward an answer she wasn't sure she could bear. What if no? What if the honest answer was no? What if the love that surrounded her was not actually for her? Not for the specific person she was, not for her particular soul, her particular way of seeing, her particular needs and fears and dreams, but for the function she performed, the role she played, the service she provided. What if she was loved the way a person loves their heat in winter, genuinely, necessarily, but not with any curiosity about the heat itself, not with any interest in what the heat might need? She sat with that. She let hurt. And then something small happened. Something so small she almost missed it. She said no to something. A request. She won't say whose. She won't say what. A request that on any other day she would have absorbed without thought. She would have rearranged herself to accommodate it. She would have said yes before the question was even finished. But that day, in that season of noticing, she said, "I can't do that today." Just that. Simple. Matter of fact. And the world didn't end. There was a moment of surprise. A small friction. But the world didn't end. She noticed that too. She bought herself flowers one afternoon. An impractical thing. A silly thing, maybe. But she stood in the store looking at them, and she thought about how long it had been since someone brought flowers into the house just for her. Not for an occasion, but just because she deserved something beautiful, and the thought landed with a weight that surprised her. So she bought them herself. She put them in a vase on the kitchen table, and she looked at them for a few days, and she felt something. Not happiness exactly. Something more like recognition. Like remembering she was a person. That is what the awakening felt like. Not thunderous. Not freeing. Not immediately. It felt like remembering something she had forgotten so long ago she hadn't known she'd forgotten it. It felt like hearing her own name called from a very far distance and turning toward it. It felt like, oh, there you are. She didn't know yet what to do with it. She didn't know where the thread would lead. She just knew that something had opened. She knew that she could not unopen it. She's grieving. That is the word for it. It took her a while to find the word because grief is supposed to have an object. Grief is supposed to be for someone. A person you lost. A relationship that ended. She is not grieving a person. She is not grieving a single loss. She is grieving time. She is grieving the years. The specific, irretrievable years that she spent giving herself away. The years she was so busy being everything to everyone else that she had nothing left to give to herself. The years she cooked for people who ate without gratitude. The years she stayed up late finishing things so that other people could wake up to order. The years she folded laundry alone at 11 o'clock at night, in the quiet of a house that was hers and wasn't, while everyone else slept and she kept working, kept maintaining, kept holding the whole thing together with her own two hands. She is grieving that woman, the woman she was in those years. Not because that woman was weak. She was not weak, she was extraordinary, but because that woman deserved so much more than she received. She is grieving her youth. She sees photographs from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and she looks at that woman in the picture and she feels something complicated. Tenderness, sadness, a protectiveness that comes too late, because that woman was still so full of something, still unlined by the particular exhaustion that sets in when you have been emotionally starving for too long. That woman still had something light in her eyes, and she looks at the photograph and she wants to reach into it and say, "Don't give so much. Not like this. Save something for yourself." You are allowed to save something for yourself. She is grieving her softness. The softness she had to put away. The softness that was not acceptable because there was always something that needed handling, always someone who needed her to be stable, always a moment that required her to be the strong one. She put her softness away, and she is not sure she can find it anymore. She is not sure it survived the years of being locked away. And that is a grief that is hard to name out loud, because the world does not always give Black women permission to grieve their own hardening. The hardness is called strength. The hardness is called resilience. The hardness is celebrated. But she knows what it cost her. She grieved quietly at family gatherings. She's very good at that. She sat at the table laughing at the right moments, eating the right things, asking the right questions about other people's children and jobs and plans. She performed belonging in those spaces even when she felt outside of it. She smiled in the church pew with something sitting on her chest that she had no language for in that context. She pretended to be fine at every gathering where someone would have noticed if she wasn't, and she pretended so well that nobody noticed. She sat in parked cars before going inside the house to restart the performance. That parking space, she knows it intimately. She knows the feeling of pulling up and turning off the ignition and just sitting, not ready to go in, not able to, just sitting in the still car with the engine ticking as it cools and the world outside going on without her, and inside the house the needs beginning to form before she even walks through the door. She ate alone after serving everyone. That one is small and enormous at the same time. The way she would make the plates and set them down and fill the glasses and then come back for her own and sit at the same table, surrounded by people she loved, and eat in a silence that nobody acknowledged. She was there. She was fed. She was fine. But something about always being the last one served, always being the one who made sure everyone else was okay before she sat down, something about that accumulated into a weight she hadn't noticed she was carrying until she put it down. She is grieving the woman she was before she abandoned herself. Because that is what she has to hold now. In this season of clarity, she abandoned herself first, before anyone else did. She was the first one to decide her needs were not a priority. She was the first one to decide her feelings were inconvenient. She was the first one to demand that she perform wellness when she was not well, perform strength when she was exhausted, perform togetherness when she felt completely alone. She was complicit in her own disappearance. And that is the hardest grief of all. Not because it makes her a victim of herself. She has too much compassion for that woman to call her a villain. But because it means she has to sit with the complexity of it. She has to grieve what was done to her and what she did to herself simultaneously. She has to hold the sorrow of being failed by others and the sorrow of failing herself. And those two griefs sit together in the chest, and they are heavy, and they are real, and they are hers to carry because there is no one else who can. She is angry. She is allowed to be angry. She is angry at the years, at the quiet accumulation of ordinary days that bled her without drama. She is angry that nobody saw her. She is angry that she was praised for the very thing that was costing her everything. She is angry that strength was used against her, held up as her identity in a way that made it impossible for her to lay it down without betraying herself. She is angry and she is sad, and she is both at the same time, and they are both valid, and she does not have to choose between them. She is sitting with herself in this grief, folding the laundry at midnight, sitting in the car, eating alone, crying at the kitchen table with no one to witness it and no one to come. She is sitting with all of it, and she is not pushing it away anymore. She is letting herself feel the full weight of what was lost. Not to live there, not to become someone defined by this loss, but because she has earned the right to this grief, and she has spent too many years denying herself the right to feel her own pain, and she's not doing that anymore. She is grieving, and it is the most honest thing she has done in years. It does not look like what she expected. She thought, somewhere in the back of her mind, in the romantic version of this story, she had half imagined that choosing herself would feel triumphant, that there would be a moment of clarity and a declaration and the feeling of a door swinging open on a bright light. She had seen the movies. She knew the narrative. The woman who finally wakes up. The transformation. The becoming. But that is not how it happened. It happened quietly. The same way she disappeared, gradually, in small moments in ordinary days. Only this time, she was moving toward herself instead of away. The first thing she learned was rest. Not vacation, not sleep, necessarily. Rest. The particular quality of being still without guilt, of sitting down in the middle of a day and not filling the sitting with plans or lists or the mental inventory of everything that still needed doing, of occupying her own life without apologizing for taking up space in it. It was hard at first. She will not lie about that. The guilt was immediate and it was loud. Every time she sat down when she could have been doing something, every time she said no to an ask that she could have absorbed, every time she took an hour just for herself, the voice came. The voice that said you should be doing more. The voice that measured her worth and output and found her insufficient. She learned to hear the voice without obeying it. That was the practice, not silence the voice. She doesn't know that you can silence something that has lived inside you that long, but hear it and then make a different choice. Hear the guilt and sit down anyway. Hear the should and say, not today, maybe tomorrow, but not today. She started to rediscover things she had forgotten she liked. Small things, things that had no usefulness to anyone else. The kind of things that exist for no reason except that they bring you joy, and joy, she was learning, is enough of a reason. She remembered that she loved music, really loved it, not as background to the cooking and the cleaning, but music she could sit inside. She started listening again, properly listening, not multitasking, just sitting with the sound. She remembered what music felt like when she was young and it moved through her like weather. She took walks, long, slow, purposeless walks, just to be outside her own house, just to be in a body that was moving for no one's benefit but her own. She walked, and she looked at things, sky, trees, the way light changes in the late afternoon, and she let herself be small and unhurried in the world. Those walks were the beginning of something. She stopped begging for emotional crumbs. That is the quiet revolution at the center of all of this. She stopped. She stopped waiting for the conversation that might happen. She stopped hoping that this time the text would be answered differently. She stopped angling for appreciation from people who had demonstrated consistently that they were not interested in giving it. She stopped telling herself that if she just gave a little more, if she was just a little more patient, if she just tried one more thing, it would be different. She stopped performing for an audience that was not watching, not with bitterness. That is the part that surprised her. There was less bitterness than she expected. She thought she would be furious at the end of this road. And there was anger, yes, and there was grief, which she had already visited and would visit again. But underneath the anger and the grief, there was something unexpected. Relief. The relief of no longer trying to make something into what it was never going to be. The relief of taking her energy back, of deciding that the love she had to give, and she had so much of it, still, this had not diminished her love. That love would be directed toward herself first. That she would fill herself up first, the way they tell you on the airplane, and then she would see what was left and who deserved it. She is learning her own softness again. That is the most tender part of it. Finding the softness she put away. Discovering it is still there, quieter than before, smaller, a little afraid, but there. She is treating it carefully. She is not rushing it. She is creating conditions where it can exist safely. She is allowing herself to be gentle, to want things, to feel things without immediately dismissing them. She is a woman who deserves reciprocity. She knows that now in a way she did not know it before, not just intellectually, not just as a thing she had been told, but in her body, in her actual lived understanding of herself. She deserves to be given to. She deserves to be thought of and asked about and pursued and treasured and valued for the specific irreplaceable person she is and not just for what she can provide. She knows that now. She is choosing herself. Not perfectly. She still catches herself slipping back into old patterns. Still hears the pull of other people's needs before she has finished attending to her own. Still feels the shape of who she used to be like a shadow. She is learning to step out of. The choosing is not a single act. It is a practice. It is something she returns to every day, sometimes every hour. But she returns. That is what's different. She returns to herself. She didn't stop loving them. She just finally realized that love should not require her disappearance. She is still learning what it means to be loved without performing for it, to rest without justifying it, to take up space without apologizing for it. She is learning these things slowly at the age she is after the years she has lived, and there's grief in that. The grief of learning it so late, of the years it took to arrive here. But there's also something else. Grace. She is extending grace to herself. Grace for the years of not knowing. Grace for the woman who gave everything because she didn't know she was allowed to keep some for herself. Grace for the girl who was taught a lesson about her own worth that was not the whole truth. The saddest part wasn't how much she gave. It was how long she believed she had to earn being loved. She is done earning. She is here. She is choosing herself. Some women don't break loudly. They fade slowly. They give and go quiet and keep showing up and keep carrying and keep holding it all together. And they do this for years, for decades, and nobody notices because they never stop functioning. Until one day they remember. They were never meant to disappear. She remembers now. And that, small and quiet and earned through so much, is everything. You made it to the end. And I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because most people don't. Most people feel something uncomfortable and they click away. They scroll to the next thing. They find a reason to leave before it gets too real. But you stayed. And I think you know why. Something in this story was yours. Maybe all of it. Maybe just one moment, one sentence, one scene that made you go still because it describes something you have felt for years but never had the words for. That matters. You matter. Before you close this video, I want to ask you to do 3 things. Not for the channel, for yourself, and for the woman in your life who is sitting somewhere right now in the same quiet pain you just spent 2 hours finally putting a name to. The first thing, save this video. Not to watch again later, though you can. Save it because there are going to be days when you forget. Days when you slip back into the old patterns, the old giving, the old making yourself smaller. Days when you need to be reminded that you saw yourself clearly once. That you sat with the truth once. That you chose yourself once. Let this video be that reminder. The second thing, send this to one woman. Just one. You already know who she is. Her name came to your mind while you were watching. She's the one who always answers the phone. The one who shows up for everyone and nobody really shows up for. The one who, if you asked her right now how she was really doing, would say, "I'm fine," and means something completely different. She will not ask you for this video. She will not tell you she needs it. That's not what women like her do. Send it anyway. A text. Nothing elaborate. Just, "I watched this and thought of you." No pressure. Just, "I see you." That's it. That's enough. Sometimes being seen by one person is the thing that starts everything. The third thing, if this story moved you, if it opened something in you that needed opening, leave a comment below. Not a review, not a rating. Just tell me one moment that found you. One line, one scene, one sentence that made you stop and breathe. Because those comments become a space where women find each other. Where someone scrolls through at 2 a.m. from their dark kitchen and reads what you wrote and realizes she is not alone in this. Your words matter more than you know. And before I go, I want to say something directly to you. To the woman who watched this whole thing. To the woman who recognized herself. To the woman who is sitting there right now feeling that particular mixture of sadness and relief that comes from finally being seen. You did not come across this video by accident. Something in you was ready to hear it. That readiness, that willingness to sit with the hard truth of your own life. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of choosing yourself. The beginning of deciding that your needs are not inconvenient, that your feelings are not too much, that you are allowed to take up space in your own life without apologizing for it. You have been showing up for everyone else for a very long time. It is not selfish to finally show up for yourself. It is not selfish. It is not selfish. Let that land wherever it needs to land. If you're new here, welcome. Subscribe if this is the kind of conversation you want more of. Not motivation, not performance, just truth. The quiet, honest, uncomfortable kind that actually changes something. And if you have been here before, thank you for coming back. Thank you for trusting this space with the parts of yourself you don't show everywhere. That trust is not something I take lightly. Take care of yourself tonight. Drink some water. Rest without guilt. And remember what you came here and remembered today. You were never meant to disappear.